Welcome to Tippcast by the Nina Guardian. Hello and welcome to Tippcast. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy with me as ever. Enda Treacy also joined us, and we'll have Thomas Conway along just in a little while. We're live on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. Loads to talk about. All four Tipperary teams in the different codes were out last weekend. So there's so much to get through. It's a big weekend coming for Tipperary. We'll start off with the hurling, Shane, will we? Tipperary, very heavy victory over Westmeath last weekend, 427 to 16 points. Jason Ford with 2-6. John McGrath and substitute Mark Keogh coming in with 1-2 each. Jake Morris with a hat-trick of points as well. What do you take from a game like that?
I think from a game like that where you're expected to win, I think the key thing you want to see is what's the attitude of the players. And I think from the word go, and even from I was watching them there when they're coming out of the tunnel. As I was arriving in Cusick Park the other day, and look, they meant business. Even everyone in the backroom team, it was just like they were playing any of the main hurling counties. And I suppose that they played Westmeath the ultimate respect. That they didn't treat them any different than what they did against Limerick and Cork and Galway. They went out to professional what they did. Racked up 427. I suppose they had their shooting woes in the first half again with 11 wides. But look, I think overall, I think they were very, very pleased with what they did. A good day's work. 22 players got a run. The subs bench contributed 1-8. I thought Mark Keogh and Jake Morris, in terms of the pace, were very, very good. And I thought Alan Flynn, particularly in the middle of the field, when he came on, was excellent as well. So look, overall, I think it was a no injuries. So overall, I suppose, apart from maybe Robbie Byrne getting the red card and he'll be out of the water for a game, I suppose it was almost the perfect day's work for Tipperary.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're joined by Thomas Conway now as well at this point. I'll start off with you, Enda. What were your thoughts on the game? The bench came in and did pretty well, scored 1-8. Mark Keogh did well. What would you take from that victory over Westmeath? And obviously, Westmeath have suffered some heavy defeats, losing by 30 points and 33 points to Galway and Cork, respectively.
Look, it was another good run out for the lads. All due respect to Westmeath coming into the game, it was a game Tip were never going to lose. So what you were looking for was maybe the shooting boots to come back on. I think in the last few matches, the wides were really starting to rack up, and we're beginning to cause a little bit of concern. And even in the first half, we could see again that some of the options that were taking the shots, a lot of wides again. But I think that just comes with the match practice, and it's been the same for every team. I think it's been a feature of the league in general that because the intensity has been so low, there's been a lot more shooting opportunities. And with that, not every one of them is going to go over. So a fairly strong team. I wasn't expecting it looked like 13 out of 15 that'll start championship were started against Westmeath. So, as Shane said, paying them respect. But with the format of the championship and the games coming week on week, I suppose there's not really that much time to get 15 lads on the field and get them match ready together and just get the consistency going. So, I think maybe that's where he was coming from. But again, the bench, I think we have a very strong panel this year. You've got some serious options coming off the bench. A lot of talk about Galway and Limerick's panels, but Tip has some class players on the bench as well. And there's a lot of good players are not going to be making the starting 15, so it bodes well for the championship.
Yeah, Tom, to bring you in on that there, what were your thoughts? Do you think anyone in particular put their hand up in the match weekend or in the match last weekend? Even I think Liam Sheedy was asked afterwards, and he talked about how there was a poor start to the game, that 9 of Tip's 16 wides came in that period when there were 7 points to 4 ahead. So what were your thoughts on the match?
You're coming over to me, are you?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Sorry, apologies, the earphones got in the way there. I think, you can only read so much into a game like that. And obviously, Sheedy will be pleased. He's probably going to emphasise the elements of their game on which they can improve, as you referenced there. But as I say, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we can entirely read too much into it. Tip ultimately, it was reflected on the scoreboard. They got the result they set out to achieve, and there were a number of probably standout displays you know, the usual candidates. But I think he'll be quite, in general, I think he'll be quite pleased. To be honest, you know, he probably would have had his eye on some of the other games last weekend to see how those teams are evolving. I mean, the Galway-Waterford one was particularly interesting. You know, looking at both those sides and how they're shaping up. So overall, you know, I think, you know, on balance, the league campaign has turned out relatively well for Tip. They've bred a couple of new players. They've got a couple of new guys in, and they're kind of coming to the stage now where they're ready for championship.
Shane, just some of the things that stood out to me in the game. Robert Byrne came in and, you know, playing his second game or perhaps third game at wing back and getting that chance with Brian O'Meara being injured. But of course, a little petulant flick out, and that means he's after picking up a red card and won't be available for the Waterford game. So he's possibly after hurting his own chances there. You know, once you have the shirt, you're possibly in control. But now Seamus Kennedy is probably going to come back in at some point. He certainly looks like he's a nailed-on starter. Brendan Maher came in centre back. He did well, and you'd imagine he's going to keep on to his place. So do you feel now that Robert might lose out that position?
I think he will, and like it's not only the red card, is the nature of it. Like, it was in a game that Tip had well in control. It was a nothing incident, really. He flicked out. It wasn't serious, but he gave the referee a decision to make. And you just think, if that happens in a run-of-the-mill league game against Westmeath when you're 20 points up at the time, are you liable to do it again in a really red-hot championship match later in the summer? I just think it's going to hurt him so much, I think, in terms of even coming onto the bench, being on the bench, I think, or even if he is on the bench, that the manager will be willing to throw him in there. Like, so, like, I think it's going to hurt him big time. Because, like, I think the back six is nailed down at this stage. I know that we have a game to go, but I think it's Barrett, Paddy Maher, Barry Heffernan, and then the half back line is Ronan Maher. And then you have Brendan or Seamus Kennedy, who can flip between 5 and 6, depending on what Liam Sheedy wants to do. You can, if you want a hurling centre back, you go with Brendan. But if you want a bit more physicality down the middle, you go with Seamus. So I just think he's a bit of flexibility there. And I definitely think from the basis of the last two games, I think they're landing on Dan McCormack as a midfielder, I think, and with either Paddy Cadell or Alan Flynn. I think, like, I was interested. I thought Paddy Cadell had another very, very good game last weekend. I suppose he had 5. I suppose the only letdown was maybe shooting, and he hit 2 points, but he also drove 3 wides, but he was busy. And then 10 minutes into the second half, Alan Flynn comes on and he burns it up for 25 minutes. So look, I think in midfield and defence were well stocked. And I know it might be harsh, and maybe in the likes of, you say, Robert Byrne or even Brian McGrath, but like there will be some of our older guard that won't be able to go 70 minutes in the summer. And as there's a saying now in modern hurling, like as important as the starting 15 is the 15 that finish. So like you will need guys to come on off the bench to finish the game out. So I just think between 2 to 9 we're well set at the moment. I think it's up front, and the balance of our forward line is what I think that's where they need to address things over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a little bit erratic in the forward line. I mean, putting up 427, you're never going to complain about that. And, you know, it'd be very unusual if you didn't win a game where you put up that scoreline. But some of the players up there, it didn't fully happen for them. Like Seamus Callanan is only making his return, so you don't expect fireworks on the first day. He got a point. Not a whole pile happened for him other than that. John McGrath got 1-2. He's trying to work his way back into form. Didn't really happen for Willie Connors and Michael Breen. There was kind of the good and the bad at wing forward. Liam Sheedy did make a comment, Enda, that of the balls that went in, he said, I think the first 17 balls that went in, we only retained 6 of them, and that simply wouldn't be acceptable at this level. So we have to take into context that Westmeath seem a nice bit off the pace at this level at the moment. What do you think about that forward line? I mean, Tipperary always have forwards, we know that, and Noel McGrath's back up there and he looks like he's pulling the strings well. Mark Keogh's coming in, maybe he's after kind of putting his hand up a little bit. Any thoughts on that forward line and how it's moving?
Yeah, the Tip forward line, it's the envy of a lot of counties, but I think we've a lot of shooters. We've always had scorers in the forward line, but it's always been about getting the balance between the lads that'll graft and the lads who'll put the ball over the bar. Obviously, Bonner been injured now. You'd probably say he would have been a starter based on what we've seen in the few games he played. And Bubbles is back in good form as well. But I think if we're replacing Bonner, we need to have at least 2 workhorses, and that'll include having Dan McCormack back in midfield, as he seems to be drifting out a good bit. So he's kind of gone out of the forward line. I'd imagine Michael Breen, the conversation with him wing forward has been ongoing, and I'm not so convinced with it. I think he drifts out of games too much, and I think he'd be better coming on as a sub. Maybe Niall O'Meara starting there instead. And to be honest with you, Paddy Cadell, I think he's a shoe in their midfield. So Michael Breen, he'll be looking for a slot wing forward, I think. As I say, John McGrath, the form of John, it's a bit worrying. Since he's come on the scene, he's been unbelievable for Tip. But he wasn't unreal the other day. He scored 1-2 and it was probably better than the last few outings he's had. But you'd be a little bit worried of him. Jake Morris and Mark York coming on now are going to put a little bit of pressure on him. But I think if he has another good game out against Waterford, you could say he'll start. So you're looking at maybe one of Michael Breen, Niall O'Meara on one wing, John O'Dwyer, and John McGrath and Seamus Callanan, Jason Ford. Jason, actually a comment on Jason, he's been around the scene a while, and I think he's turned into a real leader in that team. There's not been a word said of him every game in the league so far. He's been our best player up in the forwards, I think, and he's vital for us. So, look, the balance is where the big problem is. We've plenty of scorers, we know that, but it's keeping the ball in there and dishing it out. That's always been the issue, and it'll be the same this year again.
Thomas, this weekend, Tipperary against Waterford has a feeling like it could be a dry run for a Munster semi-final, because if we're to go on form lines, and I know Clare people won't be too happy with this, but going on form lines and what we've seen last year, people would be expecting Waterford to play Tip. And not only that, it's Liam Sheedy against Liam Cahill, his potential successor as Tipperary manager. So there's a little bit of intrigue with that.
Yeah, there will. There's kind of a natural rivalry, and it'll be interesting to see. With Cahill, he's familiar with a lot of the players on the current Tip squad. He will know a lot of them intimately and how they play. And we all know how tactically astute he is. He's proven that kind of over the course of this year and last. So it'll be interesting to see how he sets up his Waterford troops. But just on the issue of, the Tip forward line and that, and Shane referenced the fact that kind of 2 to 9 is almost cemented now, those positions. But then obviously the forward line has kind of changed complexion over the course of the league. I actually think we have a balance in the forward line. It's kind of just about getting the right guys in the field. I would argue Willie Connors could kind of take on that almost Bonner Maher-esque role. I mean, he's a phenomenally hard worker. He's also remarkably skilled. He's a brilliant hurler, as we know. But he is well able to throw himself around the place. He's well able to take a yellow card if necessary. So I would argue he could kind of adopt that kind of role. Maybe he has to a certain extent. But it will be very interesting to see up against the likes of Waterford, with Gleeson in the half-back line, how they set up to try and, I suppose, nullify those Tip forwards. Because when the Tip forward line gets going, everybody knows, they can set the world alight. It's just about kind of finding that rhythm. And, as Enda emphasised, achieving that balance so that certain players can create the space for the likes of Callanan and John McGrath, whose form admittedly has kind of been slightly volatile, but I mean, nobody doubts his ability as a hurler and his ability to fire off all cylinders when required. So it'll be very interesting. It'll be a very interesting battle next weekend. But Waterford were impressive against Galway. The likes of Desi Hutchinson, he could be playing Premier League football, but he's been remarkable for Waterford since coming onto the scene. So, I mean, I'm not going to give predictions. You're probably better placed than me, but it will be a fascinating contest. It'll be a hard contest.
Shane, the way I see it, Tipperary, I'd like to see Tipperary going out to win this game at the weekend, not because just the importance of this game in its own right, but we already know Kilkenny have topped the other side of the league, and Tipper won ahead in the league roll of honour. If Tipperary top the other side of the league, and victory will confirm that at the weekend, and they do meet later in the championship, that would be tantalising, because I think enough of Kilkenny have raced ahead with the All-Ireland titles and all that kind of stuff, and it'd be no harm to sort of have an opportunity to push away from them at the top of the league standing. So I think there is a bit of importance in this.
I think I'd be surprised if Liam Sheedy doesn't maybe use it as a carrot this week, because I think it's ideally set up for Tip, because the after this Sunday have 3 weeks to prepare for championship. I think a lot of the focus in terms of this game next weekend will be what team Waterford put out, because they have only 2 weeks to get ready for Clare, and will they have one eye on that? Or I would have thought maybe last week that maybe the team to put out against Galway was their last major hit up before the summer or before the championship, and that maybe they would hold a few guys in reserve against Tip. But maybe after, particularly the way they conceded 428, I think maybe Liam and Michael Beavens and the selectors might think, okay, maybe we need to rethink this again. We might have to go stronger. And I suppose the last thing Waterford want to do going into the championship is be on a 2-game losing skid. I just think both team selections will be interesting. I think Tip will go strong, but I do think there will be changes. I think in fairness to Liam, he's been consistent in making, I think, between 4 and 6 changes per game in the league so far, and I think he'll do that again. You think the likes of Cathal Barrett and Barry Heffernan have played nearly every minute, they've started every game. Do we need to see those two again? I'm not so sure. I think they could sit it out, and maybe Seamus Kennedy and Ronan Maher coming back in. Do we need to see Dan McCormack? I'd nearly wrap Dan up in cotton wool ahead of the summer. I just think he's such a vital cog in that team, and if he is in that midfield role, he's nearly in. And if Brendan is at 6, those two guys are nearly in sync at club level. Dan nearly knows what to do. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's Cadell and Flynn who go in against Waterford. I think the interesting thing for me for Tip next weekend, I think Shamie Callanan is going to play again. They need to get more minutes into him. John O'Dwyer will come back. It's the inside forward line for me is that for much of last week, Sunday, you had the full forward line of John McGrath, Shamie Callanan and Jason Ford. And they're all fabulous hurlers, but they're all the same. They're all the same one pace sort of a forward. And I just thought when Keogh and Morris came on, they offered a better running option into the corner. They were able to get out and run a bit quicker, and they made something happen. So I just think maybe next weekend, particularly Keogh, I think maybe Keogh has that pace and he has that physicality where he likes to take on defenders as well. So personally, he's the one I'd love to see coming into the team against Waterford this weekend. I just definitely think during the summer in the big games, I think we need a fresh face up there starting. And if it means maybe a John McGrath or a Niall O'Mara maybe having to start from the bench. And look, I think we've got to get away from focusing on the starting 15 too much, because it's the 5 guys that come off the bench, assuming we're going back to 5 subs for the championship, which I think we probably will. It's the guys that finish, and we saw with Tipperary in the All-Ireland semi-final and final in 2019 what an impact of a bench can do against Kilkenny and Wexford. So I definitely think Liam Sheedy sort of angling towards not just having a starting 15, but a 22, maybe 23, 7 or 8 guys off the bench that he knows he can trust on the big day.
Yeah, just again to come back to sort of the dry run for the Munster Championship, and Liam Sheedy coming up against Liam Cahill, will there be sort of bragging rights, or certainly trying to learn what you can from the match this weekend? Now Waterford, obviously a very, very high scoring game last weekend. 428 to 323 is how they ended up on the losing scoreline against Galway. But some of the Waterford attackers here, there's plenty of pace in there. Neil Montgomery at wing forward. He set up that goal for Desi Hutchinson, who's absolutely full of pace. Jack Prendergast was out centre forward, scored 1-2 on Dahi Burke. Kieran Bennett's a good player who can pinch a point. He only got 1 last weekend. Obviously, Stephen Bennett's in the Hurler of the Year conversation last year, and Shane Bennett, who scored 1-1, is back in there. So there's players like that I wonder, in a way, does Liam Sheedy want to see how does Barry Heffernan get on against some of these players? How does Cathal Barrett get on against Desi Hutchinson, who you'd imagine will line up there? And then also, if Noel McGrath is going to stay at centre forward, can he exploit Austin Gleeson, who you'd imagine is probably going to try and do a lot of his own hurling? So I'll just throw that to you, Thomas. Or sorry, to Enda, sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting how Tip will approach it. Obviously, Watford, 2 weeks out after that match to play Clare in the Munster. I'd imagine they won't put out a full 15, but it'll be interesting to see what they do put out. Forward line wise, they've got some serious players, savage pace, as you said. I'd be most interested to see how Paddy gets on fullback. Look, we've had some dodgy moments over the years with Paddy at fullback, and as we've seen in the last few years, kind of like maybe the pace had gone out of him for the half back line. So it's something Sheedy. He's eager to get him into the team there, and he's done okay. But when you have Desi Hutchinson, the two Bennetts, like these lads have savage pace, and they'll try to isolate him inside. If Paddy plays well in that game, probably nailed down for fullback, because Brian McGrath has actually been very impressive in there, in fairness to him. So that'll be interesting. But I wouldn't expect Waterford to have a full team out. Now, at the same time, obviously, you're trying to balance up the confidence element of going into the Clare match with not getting beaten, especially when Tip could be your next opponents if you get over Clare. So it'll be very interesting to see. Watford are shipping heavy scores, and you can kind of see they're going away from the Derek McGrath method since Cahill has came in, and it's kind of gone the opposite direction where they're trying to outscore teams rather than keep the score down. So it'll be a good test for Tip, and I fancy Tip to probably put out near start on Championship 15, and it'll be a very good test for them because Watford are motoring well despite the margin of defeat against Galway.
Shane, you obviously watched Liam Cahill very closely when he was over the Tip minor, under 20 and under 21 teams. Do you see what you saw in him then? Are you seeing in this Watford team now, and what might those things be?
Oh, I definitely think like he's. I think that these markers all over. I think they're so hard to beat, and like that first half performance against Galway, like it was just full of energy and verve, and it was just all out attack. Really, like in fairness, he's nearly the antithesis of Derek McGrath. Like he's really letting these guys off the leash. But like I suppose he's no fool either. He realised after last Sunday that and even go back to the Cork game where they conceded 5-22. Like you can't get involved in too many shootouts because you're probably going to lose more games than you'll win. Like so, it'll be interesting to see how they tighten things up. I know after the Limerick game, I think the big camera was like Austin Gleeson's positions at 6, and that's where you leave him. But then after the Galway game, is Austin so secure there? They're better off going with Iarla Daly. Look, there's no doubt. Tig de Burke is a massive loss for that team. Like he's the leader of that team. Is the heartbeat of the whole defense. Like, and he's going to be a massive loss this year. But look, I'd really just be interested. Like, I suppose my head says Liam. I don't think maybe Liam will make as many changes as I think he will. I just think I don't know whether are we reading too much into the fact that there's a 2-week break. So clear, maybe the 2-week break is ideal. It all depends on what their preparation is. Like we all know. I think the 14 to the 7-day period out from a championship match is when you get a lot of your load work done into your legs. Like, and it'd be interesting. Like, and Tipperary can sort of afford to go hard this weekend, fall back, then do a heavy week's training, and then taper off before a Munster semi-final. Whereas Watford, how are they pre-planning for Clare? So it'll be interesting to see not only Watford, but how Clare get on this weekend. The teams that are drawn in the first round on the 26th, 27th of June, what are those managements thinking in terms of, is the league over for them and they already thinking for championship, or is this one last final hit out in terms of trying to nail down some positions as well?
Yeah, I think Watford definitely want to sort of try and figure out, get their defensive shape right, because some of the scorelines that they've conceded so far throughout the league, like 5-22 the first day out against Cork, against Galway the last day, I mentioned it already, 4-28. So I think they will be looking to get fairly close to what their starting team is going to be against Clare. It's getting pretty close at this point. Just a reminder that we are live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. So please get your comments in, and we'll try and get to them. Just Thomas, final thought from you on this game. How do you see it going?
Yeah, it's a particularly interesting one. I mean, I think the situation around Austin Gleeson is particularly intriguing because, I mean, Gleeson thrives, obviously, wherever the ball is. I mean, if you can feed him with enough ball, he has a tendency to make plenty of mistakes, but he can also, work magic tricks with it, as we know and have seen previously. I probably, would share a concern if I was Liam Cahill. I'm not sure in terms of his stability at centre back. It depends, it depends on the role that he's given specifically, and they will have an eye in the Clare game. They will have, an eye in the likes of Tony Kelly and what he's liable to do next weekend. So that'll be in the back of Waterford's mind. Equally tipped though. I mean, I think, I really think it's kind of a matter of fine tuning. And as Shane kind of referenced, seeing which starting lineup is the best possible starting 15, and looking at the substitutes, when and where to introduce them. I mean, I thought it was interesting, Enda, you mentioned Brian McGrath there. Logically you would have concerns because of his maybe slight lack of pace were he to set up on Desi Hutchinson. But then McGrath is incredibly intelligent, and will position himself in order to subdue that kind of threat of a fast forward. And there are so many. I mean, like, you think of Cadogan, every team has them, Conor Whelan. So it'll be interesting to see how Tip cope with that pacey Waterford full forward line. I'll certainly have my eye on that kind of dynamic. But yeah, I think both teams will have their eye on championship. At the same time, they'll want to win the game. It will generate a sense of momentum, and that's obviously very important going into championship.
Yeah, we'll move on to the footballers just in a moment. But Shane, just the final thought, and then Enda, you can come in off the back of that. Who else have you been impressed by? I mean, Limerick had looked like they were stuttering somewhat in the first couple of games, but the manner of their win over Cork, 33 points to 219, and they looked fully back to top form. Didn't have the likes of Kyle Hayes or Grode Hegarty in the team either, so there's probably even more in them. But Limerick, Galway looking in rude health.
Yeah. I think last weekend we saw probably definitely the top two, if not the top three, probably flexing their muscles. I just thought that Limerick Cork game was sort of a bit of a joke, really. Like, I think.
Did you believe in what you saw from Cork, or do you think they were just putting out a younger team and just almost let them just find out what it's like at the deep end?
I couldn't understand the team they picked because, look, we all know that they're trying this evolution of the running game, but that needs constant work to get it right. So why put out such an inexperienced group maybe as lambs to the slaughter like that? Like, it's only going to create more doubt. And unless Cork are just throwing us completely off and they're going to bring a different style of hurling to Thurles on the 3rd of July, which I don't think they are. Like they have played well with that style, but like it's all well playing that style against a Waterford and a Westmeath, but like Limerick are the best team in the country at the moment, and we saw how that working the ball out from nearly the full back line, how that can be dismantled. A, if your first touch is not right, and B, if the opposition forwards and midfield bring savage intensities, cut down the space. And sure, look, after the first 4 or 5 puck outs, the Cork puck out is in awful trouble. And after that, like, in fairness, when Cork got the ball through behind the Limerick half back line, they look a threat. But like, it's I think it's every other county is going to be aware, and I'm sure Galway are probably maybe not licking their lips, but they'll be forewarned now to say if their forwards bring enough energy defensively to tie down those that I suppose to prevent Cork getting too far up the field from where they're very, very dangerous. Like, I think it's such a risky strategy what Cork are trying to do, like, because all you need is maybe a pass breaking down. Like, I'd be interested to go back through that game and how many of the Limerick points came from Cork mistakes, either balls turned over or cheap passes that ended up in a Limerick hand. Like, it looked ridiculous. Like,
I have to say, Shane, I think you have to go through a certain amount of pain if you want to be able to match up with Limerick. I think Cork accepted that this might go wrong.
But I would have thought it would have been better off with something close to your starting 15. And even if it doesn't come off, at least the starting 15 has experience that you can go in, tinker it for 4 weeks and try and refine it. But playing maybe 5 or 6 or 7 guys last weekend who probably will not start in the 3rd of July playing that style, I just thought that made no sense.
I think Kingston didn't realise what sort of a Limerick team were going to turn up on the day. I think maybe he'd seen Limerick in the first few games and thought maybe they weren't in full flow and they weren't at the races, and maybe he could get away with a 5 or 6 point loss and maybe play half decent. A few of the young lads get the game in, and I don't think he realised the intensity Limerick were going to bring to it, because Limerick, every block down, every pass, every time they bottled up a man, you could hear the sideline through the television. They were really up for that game, and I think it's really backfired on Kingston now, because they took an awful trimming and nothing went right in terms of game plan. And the only thing is they didn't deviate at any stage either. So maybe you had Kingston just saying, look, stay going through it, and maybe on the day of the championship we'll have something else to bring. But I think it backfired on him big time, to be honest.
Yeah, I think no matter what happens, they're going to persist because they want to build this game plan. Even against Tipperary, there was a while when it was certainly not breaking down to the same level, but it felt like they weren't necessarily going anywhere. But I think they're just accepted to some degree that that's the way it was going to be, and that they might have a tough day at the office. But that's a fair point too, Enda.
Yeah, like they won't change the game plan. Like they say, if you buy into something like that, you have to stick to it for better or for worse. Like I just thought it was the perfect opportunity. Even if you put out your best 15 and you came up short, at least you say, okay, that didn't work, or a certain player in a certain position didn't work. So like you're still going into the 3rd of July game, Munster semi-final, not actually knowing whether your best 15 playing that style can cope with Limerick. That's what I thought. I just thought it was the team selection made little sense in that regard.
Okay, so sorry, jump back in there.
Yeah. I probably think Kingston, the sentiment I got from him afterwards, that he wasn't overly concerned, about the manner of the defeat, as damaging as you would think it might have been. I think probably, as you said, Shane, Stapleton, it's worth the risk for them, because, trying to match Limerick one-on-one, teams have come at it with other game plans, haven't been, really successful, aside from Kilkenny in 2019. I mean, I actually think it's probably worth the risk for Cork to continue on with this style, and I think that was part of it last weekend. Undoubtedly, it's going to unravel in certain games, and it's probably better that it happened now than in the height of championship. So there's you see it from different perspectives.
Okay, so this weekend the Tipperary footballers are out, and it really is a huge match against Longford, Division 3 relegation playoff. Just to sort of recap on Tipperary's form so far: first day out after a good start, lost to Limerick 113 to 14 points. Second day out, picked up a win against Wicklow 212 to 112. And then against Offaly the last day out, disappointing performance, probably always maybe chasing the game to some degree, losing 117 to 112. From Longford's point of view, the first day that they played against Derry, they got pasted 21 points to 5. Then a bit more of a credible performance against their neighbours Cavan, 119 to 113. And then finally drew with Fermanagh, 115 to 18 points. Now, I know their manager, Pádraig Davis, had been talking about how some counties certainly seem to be doing plenty of training beforehand, and I believe Derry had a nice bit done, and I'm not saying in any sort of a way outside of the regulations, but they had a nice bit done compared to his side. Their goalkeeper Paddy Cullen was supposed to be missing this weekend due to some sort of a Garda ceremony, but he's after being able to get out of that. But Longford against Tipperary this weekend, it really is a big game, Shane.
Yeah, I'm actually heading up to this one myself, as I think it's just a massive game for Tipperary football, because it's I just think of the last 15 years, and I suppose the growth of the game in the county, and I suppose the relative success at minor and under 21 and senior level. I just think it's huge, because I just think to drop back to Division 4 at this stage would be a disaster. And like this, there's no disrespect to the teams that are in it. And look, Tipper in Division 4 for a long number of years, but like it's just so hard to do anything from Division 4. At minimum level, Division 3 you can do something, but Division 4, like it's the lowest. And like they've played in 2 Munster finals, they've won a Munster championship, they've played in 2 All-Ireland semi-finals the last 5 years. But I just think this is huge. Like they've really got to. I just think this is even bigger than a Munster semi-final against Kerry or Clare. Like they've got to win this game. Like you'd hate to be going into that game relegated to the Division 4, losing 3 out of your 4 league games. But you just hope, and I suppose the one thing about this group of Tipperary players that I've noticed over the years, just as when you think the bubble is going to burst and you think they're going to maybe go back to the bottom, they produce a performance when you're beginning to doubt them. You just hope that it's going to come this weekend. Like their backs are to the wall. They have to go to Pearse Park. Like it's probably one of those grounds where in the country where maybe you just do not want to go there, having to win to get a win to save your life, which is probably it is. Like, but you just hope that the injury situation seems to be gradually improving. Like Kevin Fahey and Evan Comerford and Bill Maher played the last day. Like an extra 2 weeks training will bring them on a ton. Hopefully Michael Quinnivan might be able to go either as a starter or off the bench. Like, so look, if he could give something in either role, like I just think it'll be huge. But like this is big. This is players needing to be stand up and be counted. A bit of leadership here, and fingers crossed to get the result.
Yeah, and the Darren Gallagher has been in good form for Longford. Normally, when he plays well, they play well. Gary Rogers is suspended for a striking offence, and Captain Donald McGilligan, he's been injured all league with a calf issue. From Tipperary's point of view, what are your thoughts about the team heading into this game, and what will David Power be looking from his team?
He'll be looking for the result first and foremost. I don't think he'll mind too much about the performance. 1 point win, he'd be more than happy with, but they need to start showing a bit of attack and impetus. That's been the hallmark of Tip teams down for the last 10 years. I think defensively, we've always been kind of iffy, and most of our results have come through good attack and play. Obviously, the half-back line is where most of the impetus has come for Tip over the years. You have Robbie Kiley and Bill Maher and Kevin Fahey even last year as well. That's where most of our attacking comes from, these lads running from deep. And that seems to have been missing the last few games. It's been very, very pedestrian from Tip. The build-up's been slow and teams have been able to get set. And Conor Sweeney has been on an island on his own up there, not getting much service. Longford is a very tricky game. Just looking at their group, I don't want to pay any disrespect to the teams in Tip's group, but they had a very tough group with Derry and Cavan in there as well. And Fermanagh, like these northern teams, very difficult in the league. They really targeted the league. But the only thing for Tip is, even when we were getting to All-Ireland semi-finals, I remember talking to Phil Boston there a few weeks ago after he retired, and he earmarked a game against Sligo in Division 4 as the turning point for them, where they just nicked a 1 or 2 point win. And that seems to be the springboard for Tip, is just getting over a dirty win in the league, because we don't ever produce back-to-back in the league, even when we're going well in the championship last year and in 16. So that's the one thing you cling to. And if we get back Bill Maher especially, I think he's vital for Tip with his pace. And if we can get them back, you'd hope that we can get over the line. But in terms of championship, this is our championship game, because looking at Kerry and the way they're playing this year, and they'll be eager to make up for things, championship could be a very quick run off for this Tip team. So it's vital that they stay in Division 3.
Could we have the spark this weekend, Thomas? Maybe start to get players back from injury, like Enda explained there. The talk of that Sligo performance last year, how that set the tone. So could this weekend just set in motion Tipperary moving in the right direction?
I mean, of course it could, but Tip can also have a tendency to be vulnerable in games like this, kind of against, I'm not going to call Longford weaker opposition now, but we're a little bit like the Republic of Ireland in the past, in that we can kind of elevate our performance against the stronger teams, as we saw against Cork in the Munster final last year, and have seen for the past number of years. I've been to Longford. I was there in Pearse Park a couple of years ago for a minor game. Tip lost the game. I don't think they were actually playing Longford, but it's a relatively spacious pitch. I think the trick for Tip, Longford would be physical. They'll throw themselves directly at Tip. If we can kind of concentrate that middle third of the field and, allow a bit of space for the likes of, for our inside forwards. I think the game could rest on that, because one thing that strikes me with Tip is that, in certain games, even against the better teams, I can remember watching them against, I think was a Mayo in 2019. We had plenty of possession, but ended up kind of recycling it out around the center of the field, not really able to carve open spaces in the danger zone or make inroads. And I suppose that's probably reflective of a very good defensive unit. But it also calls for maybe kind of a tactical or a kind of a restructure from Tip at times, that they can kind of change their game plan and adapt to whatever team they're playing. And I've no doubt David Power, will be rigorously prepared for it. He will have assessed Longford. I think it could go right down to the wire. I don't see either side, flying away with this one. I think it's going to be a real gritty battle. But I have every confidence in Tip. They're a talented bunch of footballers, and they're well capable of making this kind of a critical turning point in their season and for the years ahead.
Okay, just to finish up on the footballers then, Shane. I previously lived with a Longford footballer, and he was telling me about one of the most painful days he ever had playing for them was in Thurles. I think Tipperary won by something like 17 points. But he is actually fancying Longford to win this weekend. What are your thoughts if you were to go for a prediction?
Yeah, I suppose you think like Longford started off badly, but I know technically all inter-county teams weren't supposed to be back to training until the 19th of April, but I think we have to forget the six northern counties were still technically classed as elite, and provided they weren't training on GA property, they could have trained away even up before the 19th of April. So you think that maybe that's what explains of some of why Derry were so far ahead, maybe, and maybe Fermanagh probably got a head start as well. But look, I doubt it. I don't think Longford would fear anybody in Pearse Park. I think we saw in the championship for a few years ago, I think they beat Mayo there. When Dublin went there maybe 10 or 12 years ago, they got a big fright. So. Look, their record against Tipperary in the last 5 years in Pearse Park is very good. 2016, they won by 5 points. Last year, they won by 5 points. So look, they will look. Everything is going for them. I think you have crowds let back in this weekend, even though I think it's only 200. But I'm sure there'll be 200 of the most diehard Longford football fans you'll find will get tickets for that game. So that's going to be with them. You just think. Maybe the only thing that's going for us is that there'll be the change of jerseys, and we have to go back into the green and white from last year. Maybe might might inspire our lads. I just think the pressure is on. You just like to think they'll go out and express themselves. We have enough good players, and as Enda said, like a lot of our problem against Offaly the last time was just we were slow transitioning the ball from defence into attack. Like we were moving from side to side. We had nobody able to punch a hole through the middle, and like if you get a long ball into Conor Sweeney and some of the taller forwards, like they will make things happen. Sean O'Connor and Sweeney are very, very good at trying to work marks for themselves. So look, I think Tip have got to mix up that a little more. I think they've got to go strong. I think I saw enough in Philip Ryan the last day to say if he starts and he gets enough early ball, like this guy is lightning quick and he's a finisher. Like so, I just think go there strong, get on the front foot. Like I think the first 15 minutes, who can get their stall out, who can set the tone, like, and you'd like to think that Tipperary will go there and treat it as if it's a championship match and get the result. Like I just think it's huge. Like if Tipperary get through this game, whatever way, and they're still in Division 3, they have a 4-week lead into a Munster semi-final where they'll be completely written off, and it'll just be a free swing. And like we just know Tipperary in those one-off knockout championship matches, they tend to rise to the occasion. But if you're going into that off losing and being relegated, it might be hard to pick up that group in that 4-week period.
Okay, we'll move on to the camogie team now. Enda, you were there last weekend to see Tipperary beat Offaly 4-17 to 13 points, a couple of goals each for Grace O'Brien and Caught Devan. Very impressive performance. A funny old day for Marie Tehan, of course, but very, very good performance from Tipperary.
Yeah, it was very, very rounded performance, I thought. For the last few years, I've been going to watch Tip games, and as complete a performance I've seen. Now, Offaly started fairly well and seemed to have the early run, and Tip kind of slow to get going. But once they did, they were very impressive. The forward movement was excellent. The balance of the team seemed really good, and defensively they were very solid throughout the league. They have been very good. Take away the 2 sloppy goals against Cork, and they've conceded very little, 11 points against Waterford, 13 against Offaly. And similar to the senior hurlers, before Claudia Quirk picked up her injury, there was a very settled defence there. But Sarah Friday was thrown back wing back the last day, and she was very good, very impressive. She's a big presence there, very mobile, good hurler, and she set up a lot of attacks as well. But in the forward line, it was really impressive the way they transitioned the ball out of defence, and they had Grace O'Brien and Miriam Campion in the second half caused havoc inside. They were isolating. There was a lovely ball going in from Aoife McGrath and Sarah Friday and Arena Friday. There seems to be a lot of balance to the team there, even with a few of the players that were missing. We had nearly half a team in the stand watching between Karen Kennedy, Corrine Blair, Orla Dwyer, and Shauna Quirk. They would have all started championship last year. So I think at the start of the championship, I was talking to Bill Mullaney, and he was eager to get a panel, because against Galway in the semi-final last year, when the injuries came and the players were missing, we just didn't have that drive and that extra bit of quality to push on. And I think he was eager to rectify that. And the way they're going now, in years gone by, they would have made harder work of that Offaly game, but they just blitzed them and they didn't show them any mercy, and it really bodes well.
Yeah, Thomas, I don't know how much of the game you would have seen yourself, but what are your thoughts on the trajectory of the Tipperary camogie team?
I think this is a vital year for them. To be honest, I think it's the the most crucial year in a long time, in the sense that for the past couple of seasons they've been in and around the top 4, but they just haven't been able to bridge that gap between the likes of Galway, Cork, Kilkenny, the kind of elites, or the the dominant teams over the past few years. And I think it's time now that Tip kind of step up. They have kind of ample talent in that panel. They're not intimidated by those kind of by those teams, but they've taken enough beatings at this stage now to be kind of sufficiently hungry to really, really want to close that gap. And it may not necessarily mean they're capable of beating them just yet, but I think they need to establish a kind of momentum that will drive them forward. And we need to consider Tip a real challenger to those top 3. And at the moment, based on kind of the last couple of seasons, they're still a little bit off the pace. They just have that little bit to go. But I think this year could be make or break in that regard.
Would you agree with that, Shane? I mean, we talked about it before, not getting to play the league final last year, trying to break the ceiling of Cork, Galway and Kilkenny. Yeah,
I think it is a big year. I suppose the last 3 years they've lost All-Ireland semi-finals to each of the other 3. So, and I think they were unlucky last year, and that league final and the experience of playing in that final would have been huge for them, and it was denied to them because of COVID. So, look, I'm sure I'd say this week is to preparing for the game. I'd say they'll be treating this game as if it's an All-Ireland semi-final itself. I just think the value of getting to a league final would be so massive for this group of players. But as Enda said, there's a bit of depth coming there. I suppose that we needed to find that. And it was so impressive. I was a little concerned maybe ahead of the game when I saw the team and all with Claudia Quirk gone and there was no Karen Kennedy. And I just said, God, are they vulnerable here? But then I saw the scoreline, 4-17 to 13 points. Excellent. Grace O'Brien scoring 2-4 from play. And we weren't overly reliant on Caught Van, which was very, very good to see. But that's not to say Caught is unbelievable. She's playing some of the best camogie in the country at the moment. She's a serious athlete, and maybe it's just something I might ask Enda about. He's seen them up close and personal for the last couple of games. Is whether I suppose they added a bit to the backroom team last year with Dennis Kelly and particularly Angela Walsh, the S&C coach from Borris-Lee, who did great work with Borris-Lee the last couple of years. Are this group of players noticeably more athletic or fitter and stronger this year from what you've seen so far?
I wouldn't say they're noticeably stronger or anything, but what I would say is they've gotten up to pace very quick. Like, they've only been back a month together, and the performances have built up very quickly. Against Cork, they were very sloppy at times. Like, they kept with Cork, but the ball wasn't keeping inside. The forwards weren't they were still very reliant on Callanan to get the scores in that game. But they seem to have done a lot of work on the training ground. The players were very much in sync the other day, running off the shoulder. They were moving the ball out to midfield and delivering the ball into the two inside. They look very, very sharp. And as you were saying there, the reliance on Callanan, the last day, if Grace O'Brien can keep that up, she's had a lot of potential the last few years. She gets herself into good positions, maybe just takes her eye off the ball sometimes, but she was deadly the other day. And Miriam Campion came on as well, and she was very sharp. We had Maria Evanston there, centre back. There might be a little bit of concern when you're looking and comparing them against Cork, Galway, Kilkenny. Maybe they might just be lagging behind in a bit of pace when teams run at them. You've even seen that Michaela Markin was causing havoc there in the first few minutes of the first half, running at the defence there. And with Sarah Friday wing back there, I think it's even more important to leave Karen Kennedy in centre back. I know there was a bit of chat about maybe moving her up the field, but now with Claudia Quirk gone, I don't think you can have that luxury. But they are moving in the right direction, I think, and I think they really need to get this win over Kilkenny the next day. It'll be a really hard task going to Nolan Park and beating them there, but they have confidence going in, and maybe Kilkenny are a bit of a low ebb. They made very hard work of Limerick the other day, only missing 2 or 3 of the All-Ireland team as well, so there might be an opportunity there to take them down.
Would you agree with that, Thomas? Do you think that the opportunity is there, that this is Tip's time?
I think it definitely is. I mean, I think it's there kind of waiting on a plate for them. It's not going to be easy, but I mean, you know, they certainly have the ammunition in the forward line. I know Claudia Quirk, you know, she was a loss. She was a loss last weekend. But you know, they've kind of solidified over the past. They've evolved as a team over the past couple of years. They're no longer they're experienced now. They have a blend of youth and experience there that should serve them well, and they have some really they have a really powerful attacking threat in the likes of Coach Sivan, and some of the other players. So you know, I certainly think it's there for them. Now, whether they can grasp it is another thing, but certainly Mulaney will have them fired up to do so.
Okay, so we'll move on to the football now, and we'll stay with you, Thomas. Tipperary last weekend, fairly heavy defeat against Dublin, 2-17 to 4 points, but a couple of the injuries like Emma Morrissey and Aisling Maloney suffered leg injuries, and Aisling Maloney may be out for the season now. I'm not sure if you have any more details on that, but a tough day at the office against the 4-in-a-row All-Ireland champions.
Yeah, it was a particularly tough day, and you know, I've been trying to make contact with Aisling and Emma Morrissey. Not yet certain as to the severity, the long-term severity of their injuries in the context of the rest of the season. Certainly, I mean, Emma's was very severe after about 90 seconds. There was kind of a sense of shock in the stadium. She was in a lot of distress, but I think had improved after the game, thankfully. And then they were dealt a further blow with Aisling after around 13 minutes. But you know, the funny thing was that notwithstanding those injuries, and I mean, they probably took a psychological toll on the team as well, because when you see one of your teammates, one of your friends in a lot of distress, you're obviously worried. But they actually kept with Dublin for the majority of the first 20 minutes. They didn't allow them to dominate, to get on top. They had plenty of possession, couldn't really make inroads or translate it onto the scoreboard. But once the floodgates opened, and this was something that's been noticeable with Tip, I saw it in Clonmel the previous Sunday against Waterford. Once the game plan kind of started to unravel, things came apart, and Dublin just, you know, they utterly kind of consumed them, controlled the ball, commanded possession, and then eventually started kicking over scores for fun in the second half. So that's one thing Tip are going to have to look at. They'll be disappointed with the results over these past 3 games. So will Westmeath, I would add. They you know, the heavy defeat to Mayo last weekend in Mullingar. 2 other defeats to Donegal as well, and Galway. So, they're kind of coming in a similar position. The morale will probably be down. And I've seen a little bit of them. I think Tip certainly have it in them. I mean, this is a big game for Tip. And it's crucial that they kind of preserve that Division 1 status, both for their own confidence levels and obviously for next year.
Shane, Thomas talked there about like middle of the games, things are going against him and then it begins to unravel. What does Declan Carr need to do? I mean, it obviously not an ideal, kind of begin to his tenure with the pandemic and that type of stuff. So how much work he's been able to do, that's probably been somewhat limited by that. But what do you think the challenge is for him here?
Yeah, I think in fairness to them, I'd agree with a lot of what Thomas said. I thought that their performance for the first 40 minutes, even including the injuries, and I'm sure psychologically seeing Emma and seeing Aisling going off were a huge blow, but they stuck to it pretty well. I suppose when you use 2 of your better forwards, it does leave you deficient then in terms of shooting. I suppose they are finishing, they only scored 4 points in the whole game, and you're already down Aisling McCarthy and you're down Orla Dwyer, so you're down probably half of your starting forward line if you're to put out your best Tipperary team. There's no team will cope with that. And I'm sure, look, Declan Carr is not one for buying into excuses. He probably won't be using it as an excuse in training this week. He'll have probably forgotten about it last Sunday to think, look, we have what we have. I know I was talking to him on Tuesday just to confirm the injuries. I think Emma sustained it's either a broken lower leg or broken ankle. It is down the lower section. So her championship is over. Aisling Maloney has medial ligament damage. They're probably, you're looking at between 6 and 10 weeks there, which probably, look, if Tip gets to the latter end of the All-Ireland Championship, maybe she could be back. It's not the knee she injured last year. It's the other one. So it's just frustrating for her, and frustrating for Declan and all the team that they haven't been able to get their best 15 on the field. You have Orla Dwyer is just back. You probably think she's probably going to have to play a fair bit of the game this weekend, just purely on experience. They need to get experience out there. Roisin Howard. So they're a very, very young team as it is. You take out either Carolan or Leanne Fitzpatrick. A lot of that team is only 23, 24 years of age. So look, in comparison to the senior men's team, I don't think relegation will be ultimately fatal, because Division 2 in ladies football is very good. I was actually just going through the fixtures there for the weekend and the 2 Division 2 semi-finals, and you had the relegation playoff in Division 2, and I said, where's Armagh? Armagh were in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. They finished third in their group in Division 2, and they have probably one of the best footballers in the country, Amy Mackin. So it just shows you where if Armagh couldn't get to a League 2 semi-final, that maybe if Tip ended up being relegated, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. It probably gives them maybe an aspect next year for them to be able to develop maybe at a level where if they did have to miss players through injury, if they wouldn't be as out of their depth as what was shown against. Look, what we're seeing is probably one of the best ladies football teams of all time in Dublin.
Yeah, and just before we wrap up, what are your thoughts? The importance of beating Westmeath, of staying up. Your own thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a big game. As Shane said, they're not a complete disaster if they do go down, but at the same time, you're going to develop more if you're in Division 1 playing the best teams year in, year out. And Tip had to work hard to get there, and then they got relegated, and then they had to work hard to get back. And it's not easy to get back up to Division 1. As Shane was saying, it's very competitive down there. But Westmeath won't be an easy task. I remember I went to see them to play Westmeath in the league in Banshee last year. And I think they came out of a bite with just a point spare. I think we scored 12 points, and 10 of the points came from Aisling Maloney. And she's not going to be there. So it's going to be a really tough match, I think. And it's very, very sketchy at this stage, but hopefully they can dig out a result.
Thomas, final thoughts to yourself on this one?
Yeah, if I could just make one quick point, and it's ironic because it's kind of what Shane alluded to with the male senior footballers. From what I've seen of Tip so far, one of the crucial aspects of their game that they need to improve, the transition of the ball up the field. the switch over from defense to attack. Because from what I've seen, they've been kind of labored. They can, they have a good defensive unit there. They can force turnovers, but then that transition has been slow. A lot of hand passing, backwards, forwards, in or around the center of the field. And it's maybe a lack of kick passing that can actually undermine that kind of counter-attacking potential that they have, because they have pace in the forward line. They have ability in terms of scoring. Obviously, Aisling and Emma are the marquee forwards, but they're well able to kick points all over that forward line. So if they can transition the ball quicker, and it's something they really do need to do against stronger opposition, I think they can really develop as a side. That'll be my one strategic kind of observation.
So just a final thought then, Shane. Big weekend.
Yeah, I just might make another addition on the ladies' football. Like, there's no doubt, like, if they could bet their best 15 on the field, I'd love to see how they would go against Dublin and Cork with their best 15 out. I suppose, like, long term, I still think there's way more of an upside in this Tip team, but we're just with injuries and player unavailability, and like you have Aisling McCarthy to come back, and like you just love to see one good clean year with them and see where they could measure up against the best teams. And I suppose, look, in fairness to the LGFA, I know I was a little critical yesterday when I saw that they landed the match initially and in top of the league semi-final. But look, at least common sense prevailed and they moved the football to Saturday. And I know it's probably not going to help Roisin and Howard and Orla Dwyer out. That they're probably going to have to play some minutes twice in 24 hours. But look, you probably think the greater demand for them will be in the football on Saturday. If they could get that win and ensure the Division 1 survival, it would be massive. Look, it's a huge weekend for Tipperary. Look, we could be in 2 league finals in Hurling and Camogie, and hopefully if we're still in Division 3 and still in Division 1, it'll be in football. It'll be a good weekend's work. And I suppose for the Camogie team especially, look, you have the lure there of getting to a league final the following Sunday in Crow Park, one of the test events for COVID, 3,000 people there. Like, I'm sure there'll be an awful lot of people in Tipperary who wouldn't ordinarily maybe go to a Camogie League final in Crow Park thinking, if there's 3,000 people there, I'll make the trip. I've been locked in for so long. So like for them and particularly the Camogie team, you'd love to think that if there was one team to get the job done this weekend, it would be them.
Okay, well, that's it for Tippcast episode 6. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy, Enda Treacy, and Thomas Conway. Don't forget to follow the Nenagh Guardian on all the different social media platforms and get your comments in ahead of the next show. Thanks very much, lads.
Thanks,
guys.
Welcome to Tippcast by the Nenagh Guardian.
Great stuff, lads. Hello. You're gone.